Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us in our today special event, Overcoming Overthinking. Thank you all for being with us. So first of all, I want to thank Harmony House for organizing today event. My name is Khaled Isa, and I was meditating and practicing meditation with Harmony House for the past 5 years. And regarding today topic, overthinking, we have this special practice in the meditation center, which is like every 1 hours, there is a music played. And once this music played, we just have to stop, reflect, and meditate. And it really helped me to slow down my thoughts. And because of that, for today event and special topic, we have our special guest, Samantha Fraser. So thank you, Samantha, for being with us today. And yes, before we start, I want to mention that if you have any questions, please feel free to write them down in the chat box. And also, if you need Arabic translation, Dr. Selwa will be translating in Arabic. So thank you also, Dr. Selwa, for translating today event. And yes, Samantha, you can feel free and start. Thank you all.
Thank you, Khalid, and good evening to everyone that's online. And so today, as you've heard, the topic is overcoming overthinking. And I think it's a topic that we can all relate to. And I think what happens is that we tend to think that we can control all the things outside of ourselves. And most of us think or thought that we can't really control our thoughts. And so we've spent a lot of time, many years, trying to control people, trying to control situations. And as a result, we've created an excess of thoughts. So I think today's topic is really about learning how to use my mind in the right way. And if you like an analogy, how to create a garden in my mind. You know, a garden of fresh flowers, roses, the things we like to see, as opposed to a garden of weeds or thorns, if you like. And so today I'm just going to look at why do we have this habit of overthinking, and what are some of the tools that we can use to change the quality of our thinking. And there are many reasons, and I'm probably just going to cover a few. And again, as Khalid said, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat, because if you wait till the end, then sometimes you can forget what you wanted to say. And so why this habit of overthinking? Why have we learned to use our mind not in the best possible way? Let's put it that way. And the first, I think, is that it's something we've learned early on, as a child, perhaps. And I think as a young person, unless we're given guidance and tools, we actually can't work it out for ourselves, very young children. And so what we do then, we tend to overthink. And I remember when I was living in Southern Africa, and we had a meditation center there. And I remember, and this is many, many years ago, and I still remember this particular individual who came. And, we asked me, why have you come to learn meditation? And she said, yesterday, her son, who was 12 years old, asked her, how do you relax? He was 12. And she didn't have an answer. She did not have an answer. So she came to the center to learn how to relax, because she couldn't say anything. And her son always saw his parents, mother and father, stressed, And so in a way, he'd adopted the same kind of coping style. And really, he was an A student. He had everything that he needed. There was no reason why he should be worrying. But again, a habit that 12-year-old had learned at a very early age. And so unless there's the right support, the guidance, children learn how to manage their emotions and feelings, then I think that's what happens. We end up as very young people, thinking and thinking, believing that somehow we'll figure it out. And so I think what happens is that we then develop beliefs about overthinking. And we tend to think that if I keep thinking, then the problem will emerge. So I think, and maybe this way and that way. And what happens as a result of that? There's no solution. You just get a headache, maybe you get high blood pressure, and it just goes on and on. And so overthinking doesn't resolve the problem. But I think somehow we've learned that it might do that. If I'm speaking too fast, please indicate, Khalid, if they're translating simultaneously. Perhaps I'll slow down a little bit. And so, yes, so one is what we learn early on as a child. Second is the beliefs that we have around thinking. And as I just shared, overthinking does not help to resolve the problem. But I think because we don't have a solution, we think that by thinking about it, we're doing something about it. But what we're doing is just creating a lot of wasteful, unnecessary thoughts. Great, thank you, Salwa. And so the second thing I think is that nobody likes to feel that they don't know. We all like to feel certain about things. And so sometimes when we're in unfamiliar situations, what we can do, we can create scenarios in our mind, We think about how we could do it, and this is how it's going to be. We have a whole list of expectations in our mind. And when the reality comes, and it's not as we had thought in our minds, then what happens then? Same thing. A lot of wasteful thoughts because I wanted to be certain, it was something new, but in my mind, I created a story about how it might play out. And the opposite was the reality. And I think what we really need to do, we need to be able to, one, accept that we don't know everything, we can't know everything, but two, also to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Now, when you hear this word vulnerability, people often think, oh, I don't want to be vulnerable. Oh, that's risky territory. Oh, no. But actually what it means is, it means being in touch with your own feelings, being authentic, being able to step into your own truth, if you like, and be aware of your own limitations, be aware of the support that you might need. And that's okay. Because if I have a better understanding of myself, then I'm ready. It's like I'm ready in advance. But if I'm trying to be really certain and dot all the T's and dot all the I's and cross all the T's, then that's a lot of hard work. And if any of you are perfectionists out there, I'm talking to you because I was also like that, I would, and I'm a teacher. I used to teach anyway for many years as a primary school teacher. And when you're teaching young children, everything has to be organized, because if it's not, it's a bit chaotic in the classroom. So that kind of habit that I had, if you like, then translated into many areas of my life where everything was planned to the T. And if it changed slightly, I could feel that there was some resistance, or that, there were many, many thoughts as to why was it like that? And I thought I'd covered this. And so this belief that we're able to know everything, not even know everything, but this need to be certain, perhaps that's what it is. And we can never be certain, particularly now where so many things are unpredictable and change is happening at a very, very fast rate. I think the other aspect, the other belief that we have is, by overthinking, it's like I can justify my actions. You know how we all know when our intentions have been very clear and clean, if you like. And when we have made a mistake, or perhaps we've created a little bit of sorrow for anyone, nobody likes to feel guilty. Nobody likes to have this feeling of shame. It's a very strong emotion. So what we tend to do as a default kind of coping mechanism is that we tend then to start justifying, either verbally with the person or in our own minds, as to why we did it or why we didn't do it. And again, so many thoughts. And yet when you go to sleep at night, the thoughts continue until you get to a point and you say to yourself, Sam, could have done it differently. I could have done it differently. And I think being able to really develop an honest relationship with ourselves is perhaps a very good starting point. You might say, well, how do you do that practically? How do you develop a relationship of honesty with yourself? And I think we need some kind of practice, meditation being one practice, where it gives me a window into my own mind. Because at the moment, we are just either worrying about the future, what's going to happen even tomorrow, or then we are thinking about what's already happened. And if you think about your own lives, where are you most of the time? Past, present, or future? Present means that mentally you are right here with me in this exchange of ideas. And probably you're thinking of other things. It's normal. What you're going to do after this talk, maybe you've got an appointment. But to be present really means to allow the mind to be still and calm, and to be presently available in this moment. The reality is, though, not like that. And I remember a friend of mine sharing a story where she was observing her thoughts. And this is a very simple example of how we can overthink. It's not even a major conflict, but she was shopping, and she was a shop ahead every time. So I'm in the UK, so I'll talk about shops here. So let's say she was in Sainsbury's, paying at the counter. But in her mind, she was already at Marks and Spencer's in her mind, still physically in one shop, but her mind was already shopping in another shop. And I think that's how we live, I don't think we're even connected with each other in this moment, even in a conversation. And it's good just to observe ourselves, how we're in a conversation, not all the time, but sometimes, and still I'm overthinking, right? And we know, don't we, when we're with somebody who is really present for us, has a different energy, right? And I think the best service, if you like, that we can do for each other is to be present in our relationships and connections. Be available, because when somebody is not with you, when they're thinking about the next thing, or they're interrupting you because they haven't got time to listen to your story, all of these things. And then we ask ourselves, why isn't there enough trust in the relationship? Why aren't we close in this relationship? And I think it's to do with all of these things. And so the other thing I think that creates overthinking, let me start with why we do it, and then look at tools afterwards. And fear in general, but I want to look at this aspect of fear of conflict. Why? Because this is something that as a child, I ran away from. As an adult, learning how to meditate and meditating for many years, I've learned to manage it better. And so if you are a person, and maybe you're not in this call, who doesn't really like conflict, which is actually inevitable in some connections because we don't think alike. We do see things differently. We have different expectations. And so I spent a lot of my earlier years as a child, as a young person, trying to stop conflict, overcompensating, explaining to this one, whether it was in my family home with my friends, and it was exhausting. Can you imagine how many thoughts I had in my mind trying to prevent a conflict, not even between me and somebody else, but between other people, whether it be my family or at work or with friends. And I was there trying to appease everyone, absolutely exhausting. And what happened was that, if you try to not resolve conflict, it just stays in the air, right? Nobody wants to go there. It's a bit like the elephant in the room, where something has happened and nobody's talking about it, right? And in fact, nobody's really being authentic because the elephant in the room is not being spoken about. It's being thought about. Everybody's thinking the same thing, but nobody's willing to, in some cases, take that step of courage to resolve the situation. And I think it takes a lot of courage to really have, and let's not call them difficult conversations, but challenging conversations. And I've had many, and quite a few, where people have been disgruntled with me for whatever reason. And I remember one incident, or a couple actually, I'll share now, where this was, I think, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And I spent a lot of time in Southern Africa, as I said, and I was in one particular country in Zimbabwe. And there was one particular person that had a very, very temperamental nature. And at that time, 20 years ago, I was, doing my thing of trying to, not rock the boat and let's do this. And maybe this person won't get upset. And it didn't matter what you did. This person got upset because, of course, this person was in some kind of pain. And this was going on for a while. And I thought, Sam, you have got to speak to this person. A lot of comments were made behind this person's back. I don't like gossip particularly at all. And I was doing the overthinking bit, the belief that if I just think it through, it will be easier. So I spent ages practicing. Okay, I can say it like this. Okay, I'll say it like this to her. I must have been in my, don't know how old I was, 20 something back then. It was longer, maybe 30, 25 years ago. And so I played this scenario because I was terrified of facing this particular individual who was quite strong and very volatile over the smallest thing. And so I practiced, okay, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to say, thinking, didn't do it. Anyway, it was, the situation's just going on and a lot of people talking about this individual. The atmosphere was not great. And I just had to, just have the conversation. And so I said in a very tiny voice, I think we need to have a conversation. Jim, can we have some time together just to talk about a few things? And the person reacted, what do you mean? What do you mean? Why? And I went, oh, and I said, I want to talk about that, every little thing, there's a reaction. And the person said, give me an example. She was going, I said, I don't want to be petty. I don't want to go back into the past. Don't really want to go there. She went, no, give me examples. So I started. I gave one example, two examples, and the person began to cry, much older than I was, more senior than I was in age. And that taught me something. When I saw that person who was double my age at that time, break down and cry and say, but you don't understand what I've gone through. I said, I do, but you've got to let it go. You've got to let it go. So sometimes the conflict or the challenging situations that we find ourselves in, in my experience, it's much deeper than just what the conflict appears to be about. So her volatile sort of time bomb kind of nature was basically her suppressed pain over many years. And I watched that person, and I think when I had that conversation, I made sure that I wasn't irritated. I made sure that I was having this conversation because it was going to be beneficial for that particular person, for the atmosphere, for myself. And I think because she felt the intention was not to really create pain for her, she was able to hear me, right? So in other words, what I'm saying is make sure that you've done the inner work. When we have any of these conversations, we need to check that I'm not irritated. I'm not in a space of revenge. I'm not angry. All of these things, because even if your words are correct, as we know, the vibration, everybody can pick up the vibration. Whether you meditate or not, doesn't matter. We all feel somebody's energy and their authenticity. And so in this particular instance, the next day I watched her about to shout or react, and she just went quiet. And I watched her realize and begin to see her own nature. And so why am I sharing this? Because when we, and maybe courage is the quality that we need to deal with challenging situations, then we're able to manage our mind much more efficiently, because if we don't, we're just going to be thinking about them. And sometimes we have the wrong impression completely. We're judging, we are interpreting every behavior from one incident that happened, let's say, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. And so if I don't get my facts straight, I don't get the right story, not my story, the story, then can you imagine how many waste thoughts we're creating, which is basically based on somebody else's or even my own imagination, perception. Imagine if we could put a value to our thoughts. Every thought had a certain value, monetary value. I think we would pay much more attention to what we're creating. We would never, ever withdraw so many thousands of pounds out of the bank and put it in the dustbin. Never, never. But yet our mind is a bit like that. We don't, just generating all kinds of thoughts, and yet we're wasting our own energy. There's a very deep connection between our time and our thoughts. Time is not really in that clock that we have on the wall, to be honest. But time is very much connected to what we're creating inside of our own minds. Think about the time when you are enthusiastic, you are just high in energy, everything's going well, and you have this much work to do, right? A lot of tasks. You manage. You manage. Why? Because your state of mind is stable and calm. Finish, no problem. And still, after all of those tasks, you have so much energy to continue another set of tasks. The day when you get some bad news, the day when things are not going too well, what happens? Even the first task seems like a mountain. So it means it's not the task then. What it means then, it's the quality of my own thinking that makes me feel that I don't have enough time, or makes me perceive that a situation is bigger than what it is. And don't get me wrong, there are difficult situations that are a reality for sure. But there are other situations that are not really. But because of my thinking, I've made it appear a lot bigger than it is. And the thing about overthinking is that if I'm thinking and thinking and thinking, I don't have the energy or the space to see the solution, which I always feel is right next door to the problem. We have the answers inside all of us. But if I don't have the space or the energy to discern what my next step is, because I keep thinking, then it's like I'm trapped, if you like, in my own mental prison. Sounds strong. My world of thoughts. And so the aspect of fear, of conflict, and I would urge you, and one thing I really like to do in any kind of situation where you're having to face a challenging situation or a conversation, is prepare the ground before you go there. So this whole aspect of visualization, where you kind of imagine the scene in front of you in your mind, but it's not that you're trying to determine what they're going to do, but you're actually trying to set your own stage before you enter that room with that particular person. So I think about how I would like my stage to be in that conversation. And I visually put myself in that room with that person, not thinking about the words, but just focusing on my consciousness. And I visualize myself just being in a state of peace. So that when I'm in the situation, I have an option, because when you visualize, it feels like you've actually done it. You've only done it in your mind. But when I get to that situation physically, I have a choice. And the choice will be, Sam, you can be calm like you were yesterday in your mind, or you can default to just getting annoyed. Choose. And so I think the other thing in terms of why do we overthink, there are many, and I want to get on to the tools of not overthinking, is any kind of loss. And whether it's the loss of a person that's close to you, whether it's a loss of your status, position, any kind of loss will definitely create any kind of many ways thoughts. And I think it's this belief that everything will exist forever, which we know it doesn't. Most of everything that we can see with the physical eye around us, we know will have an end date. Either if it's an object, it will get broken. If it's a person, again, we know that none of us are here forever. And I know that when I lost my own father over a year ago now, that was a huge challenge, actually. And what I found very useful for me personally was that even though I'm a meditator for many years, and there are certain beliefs that I have and have experienced that would have helped me in that situation, I decided I didn't want to hear any theory. I just wanted to be in the moment with my emotions and to allow myself to go through the grieving process. And yes, there were many thoughts, and yes, there was an extreme amount of sorrow. But I think if I had tried to, and people saying, oh, Sam, he's a soul and he's in a good place, all these things that people say, which wasn't helpful at all. Although I knew it by technically, theoretically. But I think what I didn't want to do, I didn't want to bury how I was feeling. I didn't want to, I wanted to acknowledge and be present with every feeling so that it didn't come out later on. So I feel, okay, a year later, yes, still processing it, but in a much better space, because at that time, for me personally, what was useful was just acknowledging the feelings, not trying to use spiritual knowledge or whatever to try and put it in a nice box. No. So I think it's very important to be very honest in our emotions and to really hold ourselves or hold our feelings or be aware of how we're feeling. Because if we suppress it, it will be triggered many times over and there'll be some kind of reaction. And so it might be what somebody says, it might be the smell of the perfume or aftershave, it can be anything. Somebody might look like that person. But if I haven't resolved my own feelings, then where does overthinking come in is that it gets triggered, that little wound gets pressed. I react, and then there's regret. Why did I react? And then there's lots of thoughts. And I think the signpost is, Sam, there's something that you need to deal with there. And I think most of us, I don't want to generalize, but I think we've all experienced some degree of trauma, very small percentage or very huge, because as a child, what we might think is nothing to a child is trauma. And if I'm not able to process it, and often if you're 5 or 6 as a child, you can't process it. You don't have the vocabulary, the experience, and so you might bury it. And so it might be a feeling of being abandoned as a child, being sent off somewhere for a period of time. And in your world, as a child, you were rejected. You didn't understand that it was for your safety, or your parents didn't. You don't understand that. And so I can't process that as a child. And so what happens, we carry this feeling with us as an adult, and it gets triggered by other things. And then we don't know why we're reacting. And then we're having thoughts about, oh my God. And so just being able to be in touch with our emotions. And personally, for me, meditation has been a great resource or method to help me do that safely. Because it's no point bringing all of this stuff up and I don't have a method to deal with it. That's just asking for trouble. I don't want to be, processing something when I don't have a tool to use or a method to really understand what's going on internally. And so the way that I acknowledge this for myself is that if something happens and there's a reaction, like a strong reaction, I measure, okay, that was a situation. That reaction, Sam, where did that come from? Wow, that was a bit strong. Chatting to myself. And I think one of the good things, and I think I can say this with confidence, is that I have been very, very careful not to project, most of the time, I'd say 95%, not to project my emotions on others. And maybe, and so analyzing that reaction and trying to look at, wow, what was that? What was the trigger there, Sam? What was going on for you? And the more I'm in tune with my emotions, I feel, the more it helps me with the quality of my thoughts. It stops me from blaming. All these kinds of things, blaming, that's not one thought, that's many thoughts. And not just that, you then tell 10 people, right? And maybe you influence their mind and their thoughts. So it's like a chain reaction where we feel we're a victim, or we start blaming, and then many thoughts. And then, of course, others are influenced. And I think we all have a responsibility in terms of how much are we, and this may sound strong, polluting the atmosphere with our own thoughts. We're very good at looking at the environment and trying to save energy and recycling and looking after the physical environment. What about the atmosphere? Let's call it the spiritual environment, because you walk in a room and it can be beautifully decorated, but somehow you're not feeling comfortable. Somehow you are on edge in this room, because perhaps before you entered that room, there was a huge argument, very unpleasant conversation. And that atmosphere, those vibrations, if you like, that energy stayed in the room. And so I suppose what I'm saying is that we're all going through, I think, well, the world is going through a very challenging time. And I think, well, I don't want to say things are going to get worse, but it's challenging. And I think the support systems that I might have relied on in the past, they were breaking down. Things I could have said, okay, do that. Okay, that's the solution, sorry. I can't say that now. Even people I could have relied on, they're also going through their own journeys. And so how can we support each other? For me, it's about how we manage our own mind. And what kind of atmosphere do I create? Let's just start in our own homes. Let's start within my own mind. First of all, that's the first home of the self, right? But then secondly, in my own home with my own family. If we can create an atmosphere of safety, let's start within ourselves and within our homes with our families. At this point in time, in this point in time, that is a great service, because there is a lot of uncertainty in the world. And that may even be increasing. But if people feel a sense of security, a sense of stability just through your presence, that's a gift. And I'm assuming the fact that there are people listening in to this particular talk this afternoon, this evening, it means you're already thinking about these things. You're already doing something to enhance your own lives and, of course, enhance the atmosphere. And I really feel that so important. And so overthinking is not just about managing our stress, but it's really about creating a safe space, not just for myself, but for others as well. And so I wanted to look at one particular thing, but maybe I'll see if there's time. Okay. I wanted to look at the aspect of identity as well in terms of overthinking, because I think our sense of self, the image that we have of ourselves, can either create stability or it can create instability, because we're living in a world where there isn't equality, where there are certain perceptions about different groups of people. And if my identity or my sense of self is not rooted in something permanent, then it can feel as if you're on an emotional roller coaster. So I'm just going to share my screen. I think I can it's just one slide. I don't use a lot of slides because I think for me, the diagram might be useful. So I'm just going to do that now just to explain what I'm talking about and where the overthinking lies. I hope you can all see that. Okay. And so this is called Understanding the Layers of Me. And what we could say is that there are different layers to our identity. And I think wherever my sense of self lies determines the quality of my thinking, let's say that. And so the outer layer, the blue circle, is really basically our physical identity, whether it's my race, my gender, my age, my religion, my economic status, appearance. And if my identity, if my source of happiness or peace or stability is based on any one of those things in the blue circle, then there's going to be some fluctuation. So let's say it's my profession. And let's say I'm a good teacher. I think I am. And in this particular setting, I'm getting very good feedback. People love the way I work with children. I go to another setting, another country, another style of education, and suddenly there's criticism. Suddenly I'm being called into the office. I'm being observed frequently. What's going to happen to my sense of self? And of course, if that's happening, then can you imagine how many waste thoughts I'll have? There'll be self-doubt, or I'll try and prove that I'm right. Why? Because my sense of self is based on not who I am, but what I do. And so it could be anything, even an artist. His work or her work is being exhibited. They're in the background. And people are commenting on the artwork that they see in this exhibition. And every bit of praise that the artist hears, he feels great, she feels great, yes. No waste thoughts, great. Every criticism that the artist hears about his piece of work or her piece of work is like, he's being criticized or she's being criticized. And now self-doubt. What do they mean? How dare they? Indignation. And so what I'm trying to say or get at using this model is that let me check where my sense of identity, what my sense of identity is based on. Because one is my own perceptions of my profession, but also you're having to deal with the perceptions of society, whether it's for gender, whether it's for race, whether it's for age, whether it's for religion. And there are all kinds of connotations about certain groups of people, which you can buy into or not. But again, that can create a lot of waste thoughts, unnecessary thoughts. The second layer is the personality, the beliefs, the talents, the behaviors. But the third is the inner core. And what we're saying, as many of you may already know, is that if I have this awareness, or my consciousness is based on that we all have this inner core, which is by definition, all of these things: peace, love, happiness, wisdom, and strength. And what we tend to do is that we tend to use the outer layers to experience this. So if I'm looking good and I feel good, then I'm happy. You know, if I'm economically quite well, if I've got enough to live off, everything's going well. What we're saying here is, can I start from here and use my inner core to influence the relationship? So even if my relationships are not, there's one relationship that's not going well, I'm not expecting that to get me here, but I start here and I use my own calm nature, my own inner stability to influence the relationship. So in the example of that person who was always volatile, and I said, can we talk about it? I wasn't expecting her to change, but what I did, I drew on my own inner resources to have the courage to look at that relationship. And fortunately, she heard me because I was focused here in the middle. I was focused on my inner core of peace, love, happiness, and wisdom. But I'm going to stop sharing because it's always nice to see the person. But the point of that is that fundamentally, I think our thinking is very much, as I just shared, is determined by how I see myself. And when I started meditating 26 years ago, what began to challenge my beliefs about the way I saw myself was when I was able to experience a quality of peace and love that I'd never experienced within myself before or in any other relationship. It wasn't for hours, it was just like, in the early days, a minute. That was enough, though, to say, Sam, hold on a minute. Peace can't be outside because you just sat down for 5 minutes, and in that 1 minute, it was amazing. And so then I had to look at my own belief that somebody has to give that to me, or something has to happen externally for me to feel that. And so what I realized was that we all have a treasure store of that inner core, those, let's call those inner treasures, which we glimpse from time to time. And different things can trigger it, you know, being in good company or being by the ocean. Suddenly you're feeling very calm, very energized. And it was a trigger, which means it was already inside of you. And so I always say this: if my best friend or my children or my husband, my wife can make me feel great, or going on holiday can bring out this enthusiasm, this love, this happiness, it's there. Then why can't I be my own trigger and bring it out most of the time? Because I have to go to work, my husband has to go to work, my children have to go to, I can't be with them 24/7. But they show me, they've indicated that there's something deep within myself that they've been able to bring out that I can learn to bring out for myself. And so definitely some kind of reflective practice is a must. And as a teacher, I was always advocating and practicing in my own classroom reflective practice with children. They were 8 or 9 years old. And I remember them, we used to practice, I think Khalid mentioned, having the system when traffic control where you stop for a minute and just reflect. And so we did that. And I would get so busy and the kids would remind me, Miss, we're supposed to stop now. Because they wanted to feel a sense of peace. They wanted to feel a sense of stability. So when I would forget, they would remind me. And so some kind of reflective practice, it's like a window into your own mind to see what's happening. Unless you see it, you think it's normal overthinking. You think, well, I can't, that's what everybody else does. I can't help it. It's everybody else that's making me think like this. That's the default kind of statement. When I'm able to see exactly what I'm choosing to create, when I begin to understand why I'm having so many thoughts around that particular situation, I understand that it's much deeper than what they said. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But underneath that is all the things that perhaps I haven't dealt with, all the things that I might have suppressed unknowingly. And for me, what I'm seeing in myself, the people that I live with, I'm at the Global Retreat Center in Oxford, is that things that have been suppressed, I don't know about all of you, are coming out. Good, bad, and you're having to deal with them because they want to, the soul, the real you wants to be free of anything that's limiting it. And so these things that have been suppressed inside are just getting triggered and coming out so that we can say, bye-bye, don't need them. Waste thoughts, overthinking, don't need them. Because that's not my real state. My real state is that inner core of peace, love, and happiness. And so some kind of reflective practice, and we'll do a meditation in a moment, in the next few moments, I feel is essential. Some people like to journal. I like to get my thoughts down on paper. That's also a very useful exercise. Because sometimes I can't always see it just by looking in my mind. But when I just do some free flow writing, just writing, whatever's coming up in my mind, I have something in black and white that gives me some information as to what's going on there. And and the other thing is a connection, my practice anyway of meditation, as it may be for some of you here, is to have a connection with the divine, with a higher source, because at the moment, my thinking and overthinking tells me that actually I'm quite weak. I don't have the power to generate powerful thoughts consistently, because we get influenced by many things. And so I need a connection which can recharge my battery, which can re-energize my inner being. And that is the divine, the source. And so when I connect to that source, it reminds me of my own inner treasures. It's not that I'm saying, help me, help me, help me, help me, but it's allowing me to see myself as I really am. So for me, in this connection with the divine, it's almost like having a mirror and being able to see clearly beyond your roles, beyond all the things that you do, and getting to the heart, that core. Because when I see myself like that, and that's my awareness, then that translates into action. If I see I'm just so depressed, I don't have any, I can't do it, it's so difficult. If that's my consciousness, it will be difficult. I remember just one story before we have meditation. Many years ago in the retreat center, before it closed, I was part of the Living Values educational program. And it was an international trainer. We had people from all over the world. And we did this exercise to look at the aspect of identity. And, we had to think about our profession, different aspects of ourselves. And I remember there was this one particular person from Somalia, and he had lost practically everything. He'd lost family members who were very close to him. He'd lost his profession. I think he was an engineer. He lost his status. But what was amazing about that individual, and I still remember that today, it was many years ago, although he had lost so much, he said, what I do have, I have myself, and I have this connection with the divine. And he said that I must be here for a reason. And so, yes, of course, he would have had a lot of loss and grief and all of that. This was years later, he was telling us the story. But somehow he had recognized that, yes, lots of trauma, lots of loss in his life, but still there was this thread of hope, which I found extraordinary, when he said, I have myself and I have this connection, and I must be here for a purpose. How do you get there with all of that loss? The power of his own mind, you could say. He could say the quality of his own thinking. You could say it was his faith. But I think what I'm trying to say here is that we have an amazing capacity. We have a treasure store that we haven't even begun to tap into, which I think we can use to begin to master our own mind. Yes, because the mind is something that belongs to me. Just as my hands are under control, it's not doing all of this, it's pretty much under control. In the same way, we're able to also discipline and master our mind. Steps are some kind of reflective practice. If you are doing that already, increase it. Be more aware whilst you're in action. Don't just wait to have that practice whilst sitting down. Well, I'm aware of the time. There is a sort of a set plan for this, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. I think I'm done with that now, Khalid. I should be doing meditation now. But I think what I'd like to do in the meditation is really do a summary of what I've just shared, and then I think there'll be time for questions. So let me do that now. Let's have some time for reflection. And in that reflection, I'll try and summarize what was shared in the last little while. So just sit comfortably. And just relax the body completely. And as I sit comfortably, I just become the observer of my own thoughts. I'm just simply watching my thoughts, not judging them, not analyzing them, but just watching them. And as I do that, I begin to realize that I'm separate from my own thoughts. And if I'm separate, it means that I can create any thought that I choose. And when the thoughts in the mind are so many, I have the power to stabilize the mind, calm the mind. And the way to do that is just to remember my true self. To remember that behind my name, my profession, my beliefs, my personality is this inner core, all these inner treasures of peace, of love, of wisdom. And when I remain in the awareness of just being that, and I use these treasures as powers in my day-to-day life, I'm able to respond in the way that I choose. I'm able to influence the situation in a positive way. And so I don't need to be ruled by my mind or by situations, but I can choose to take a step back, take a step inside, and connect to the being that I truly am. And in doing this, I'm able to connect to a higher source, the divine, the one who is an ocean of peace, an ocean of love. And when I align my mind with that source of light, of love, then it's as if I recharge my own battery. I replenish and nourish my own being. And in doing that, I'm able to nourish my own relationships. I'm able to have those challenging conversations. And when I use courage in my own life, then it's as if I get so much support in return. And so just now, for a few moments in silence, just visualize that connection, that alignment with yourself and the divine, connecting to the source of peace, the source of love, and allowing that to flow through you and into the atmosphere. When we align ourselves with that source, we're able to create a powerful atmosphere, an atmosphere that can create hope, stability in the lives of others. So just 30 seconds, bathing in that light of love, of peace. It's as if you're a channel for the divine to create an atmosphere of peace and love. Thank you.
So thank you, Samantha, for sharing this valuable experience with us. And yes, before I start asking the question, I just want to mention that Samantha is 26 years meditator and also 25 years working as a teacher in primary education, and also 20 years serving in different countries in Africa, and now based in GRC, Global Retreat Center. And Samantha, based on your experience, like teaching 25 years in meditation, there is many mothers and also teachers. They say, how can we balance from overthinking and responsibility? They said we are responsible and we should worry and we should overthink. So what is your answer to find the balance, the fine line between responsibility and worrying?
Yeah, I think the first responsibility is to yourself. I know as a parent, I'm not a parent, but as a teacher, many parents saying, well, you know, my child is doing this and that, and definitely lots of worry. And I think what we haven't learned is that the first responsibility is to ourselves. Like the parent, I shared the story of the mother coming because her son asked her, how do I relax? So she was quite proactive. She went, well, if I can't answer that, I better learn how to relax myself first. And so the first thing is you need to take time out for yourself. It doesn't mean going out anywhere. I'm talking about going inside, because when I have that responsibility to my own thoughts, my own mind, then you're able to be an example for your family. You know, children, they model our behavior. It's not what you say. You may say all the right things, but they're watching you at every step. And it's that they're internalizing. And so all parents want their children to be successful, not just in terms of their professional lives, but also as an individual, as a human being. And so I would really say, I'm not saying it's easy, let's start modeling the behavior that we would like to see our children exhibit. And for that, it means that we have to do some work on ourselves, because when we were children, nobody told us this. You know, I grew up, my parents from the Caribbean, and they have a particular style in terms of how they raised me, right? I wouldn't perhaps do exactly the same thing, but I think it's about being honest and taking the time out to deal with my own, some of my own things, so that I'm able to be an example. So, and that doesn't happen in just a day. That's consistent practice every day, being very honest. When you mess up, can you say, look, I've messed up with your child, with your daughter, with your son? It's important. Then, you know, they are very intelligent. Can I be honest? And just modeling that and saying, look, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to say that. This was going on in my world. And so that's why I said it like that. Having those kinds of conversations, I think, are very, very helpful. You're modeling honesty, you're modeling being in touch with your emotions. Sorry, Kelly, long answer.
No, it's perfect answer. Thank you so much. Also, we have like two questions in one question. It is like when we are overthinking or we are worrying, there is a story in our head. And the question is, what are some alternatives to the story that I am telling myself? And what more do I need to find out in order to see if the story is true or false?
That's a very good question. I think that we all have stories that we're attached to. And I think sometimes the story that we keep playing out or saying to other people, in a way, is still serving us. I don't know who asked the question, and this may not be the case, but sometimes we use the story to justify my current position, to justify my actions. I'm not saying it's for the person who asked the question. It's a very subtle thing. And I think if I want to discern whether it's the story or whether it's fact, then I need some kind of power or inner strength. And that's why I would really recommend some kind of reflective practice to begin to see, to begin to be able to discern, am I attached to the story? Do I pull it out when it's convenient, right? This happened when I was 10, and so that's why I can't do emotions. Whatever it is, we justify sometimes in our relationships based on what happened when I was a child, but now I'm an adult. I'm an adult. How much can I still keep using the story of when this happened or that happened? And so let me check that. But when I begin to create some kind of reflective practice, it gives me the abilities to say, well, actually, this is the case. Maybe I'll give you an example of the story and fact. And so I was in a meditation center, and somebody came. She was one of our regular students, and she came to have a chat with me, which means some criticism. I wasn't doing something well enough. So she basically said to me, you're not loving Samantha. And I listened for half an hour of how bad I was. I listened. And as she was talking, I was able to say, well, hold on a minute. Yes, that's true. But the rest of it, That's your story, because she told me her story. And I was able to pick out, and I think this is what we need to do for ourselves. How much is based on my story, and how much of it is really based on fact? And to be able to do that successfully does require silence. We need to take time out for ourselves, and we need to be vulnerable and honest and have the courage to actually start that journey of really being able to be ready to have that internal conversation with ourselves. And it does require humility as well. So it's possible, but it's possible when I'm able to introduce more silence, a reflective practice for myself, to begin to see the difference. And sometimes we take the responsibility for everything. That's also not good. Oh, it's me. Oh my God. No, I need to be able to distinguish. Yes, I apologize. That was based on the story. But actually, some of that is based on this. And I'm talking about facts. Where it's facts that can be validated, it's not you. Where it's emotion, it's often the story. That's how I discern it. That helps. Right? So let's say fact would be that somebody is always late for a particular appointment, and it then makes me late for everything else. And then that's like a knock-on effect. So then I communicate. That's not my story. That if you can come on time, that will be really helpful, because the other appointments then will be on time. If I say, you're always late, you don't respect me, that becomes emotion. That's my story. They've triggered some feeling of being disrespected in the past. That's my story. I don't know if that helps. And so it's the way that I communicate things that happen. If it's fact that when you're late for 10 minutes, this has an impact on the other things that I have to do. Fact, it's true. When I say, well, you don't respect me, you're always late, you don't think about me, story, trigger, something is going on there. So it's based on, I think, on our reactions. Yeah.
Thank you, Samantha, for all your sharing. That's really benefited us. And I just have one announcement, like tomorrow, Sunday, we have 30 minutes talk, 30 minutes meditation in Harmony House. The flyer will be posted in our Instagram, Harmony House Kuwait. It will start 6:30 and will end 7:30. And yes, thank you, Samantha, for being with us today and sharing all this treasures with us. And good night for everyone. Good night, Samantha.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good night.